Today's May the 5th, 2021. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. With me is Kerry Alexander, founder of the Remember the 10 Run, which began in 2007 and it is in its 15th year. This interview is being recorded with Zoom and will be part of the We Will Remember Promise Oral History Collection. And by way of context, January 27th, 2001, a plane crashed carrying 10 men associated with the men's basketball program here at OSU. And shortly after that, the university and the community made a promise to the families of those 10 men that we would never forget them. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Tanya.
Okay. Before we talk about the promise and the run, let's learn a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Well, I was born in Oklahoma City, actually about 3 miles away from where I live right now. My parents were students at Oklahoma City University, and then they moved back to my dad's hometown in Cordell, Oklahoma, in Ouachita County. So I'm a fourth generation of Alexanders that grew up in Ouachita County. And my dad went back to run a business, a car business that my granddad had. He'd fallen ill, and with his declining health, my dad was working 6 days a week. Trying to get that business running, and that's how I grew up, with a car business and dad working long hours. And I graduated in 1982, and then went to Oklahoma State and graduated from Oklahoma State in 1986. And I met my wife there, and we have 4 sons, one of whom has already graduated from Oklahoma State, and 3 more maybe on the way someday.
Okay. Well, how did you come to be at OSU?
When I was in high school, one of the activities I was involved in was 4-H, and 4-H had a couple events my sophomore and junior year that were based at Stillwater's campus of Oklahoma State. And I found the people so incredibly friendly. It was both students and the administrators. It just seemed like a fun family atmosphere. And the funny thing is that I grew up attending games at the University of Oklahoma. My parents were, rabid fans. Their grandparents were as well. In fact, my wife's father and grandfather were as well. So we both grew up in OU families. And I went to all the games, and I think I made every home game from 1967 until really my sophomore year at Oklahoma State. And then I attended the famous game where Von Schaman kicked the field goal at Ohio State for OU, and attended a bunch of Nebraska games that came down to the last second. But when it came down to where I wanted to go to school, Stillwater and Oklahoma State felt like family. And so it was a good fit for me.
And what did you major in?
Political science. I knew I wanted to go to law school. When I was in high school, my major activity, besides being the last person on the bench in every sport I played, in a small town, you have to play. It's kind of the law. You have to play. And I was about 6'2", so I really had to play. And I think I was in a lot of highlight films for kids from Hobart and Clinton and these other towns when they were making great plays. They usually ran right over me to make those. But other than that, my athletic career was not too accomplished. But I was involved in speech and debate and was successful with that, and wanted to go to law school. And political science, I thought, would be the best avenue to pursue both my interest in politics and also to set up a career as a lawyer down the road.
Well, how did you become to have an interest in that?
Part of speech and debate, you learn a lot about current topics. There's one topic called extemporaneous speaking, and you're given a topic, and you have to have studied the issue pretty well. But you have about 20 minutes to put together a 5 to 7 minute speech on that topic to defend a position you have, and it tells you if you're for or against. So, for example, if something was topical about, let's say, gun restrictions, no matter what your views are, you would be given either pro or con, and you'd have to give that position and argue it well. And it couldn't be shorter than 5 or longer than 7 minutes. But by studying current events, by being, trying to be topically aware, I really found a fascination for politics, and later worked several years for both U.S. Representative Glenn English, who was a representative at the time in his D.C. office, and then later worked for David Boren, both in Oklahoma, and then eventually worked for David Boren when he was during his time as a U.S. Senator.
Well, when you made the decision to come to OSU, how did your parents take it?
I don't remember it being that controversial. I think they took it in stride and it was fine. I will tell you that back in those days, we're talking like the early 80s, Oklahoma State, we had Jimmy Johnson as the coach, but we weren't winning a great number of games. It was a struggle. And one of those kind of time frames where things weren't great when I went there. But within a few years, when I graduated, during the years I was there, we had the number 1 baseball player, in the country. We had the number one wrestler in the country. So we had, we had Pina Cavilla. And then after that, Robin Ventura in baseball. We had Scott Verplank in golf. We had a football team that had, a Heisman Trophy winner and 2 NFL Hall of Famers in Barry Sanders and also in Thurman Thomas. And the basketball team even went to the NCAA for the first time between, I think, Iba and Coach Sutton. I mean, it was one of those kind of stretches where we really had a great time. My dad would come to the games and all the Father's Day events, my mom to the Mother's Day events. But OU at the same time was winning national championships. So I'm sure there were several drives to Stillwater for a Parents' Day when we played Kansas, and neither team had, 2 wins, between them. And OU was playing Nebraska or something else that they kind of grown, but they kept it quiet and they were supportive.
Well, when you're on your first day, when did they come and drop you off, or did you drive yourself?
I drove myself up to school, and so that was I had a great time doing that. I worked from the time I was 12 on. I think my first job was washing dishes for Harvest Crews at a Greasy Spoon in downtown Cordell. And my parents said, if you work, if you head off there and take care of business, we'll help you get some transportation, a motorcycle, whenever Christmas comes around the next year. So at 13, I was able to work and save money and use it for the motorcycle. And then later I saved money and did a lot of work to afford a car. The car that actually my dad gave me was a 1979 Daytona Pace Car Edition Trans Am. And it was the one extravagance they ever did. We didn't travel a whole lot. The gifts weren't extravagant, but he was a car dealer and had a once in a lifetime chance to get a very cool car right at the time that I was, of age. Turned 16 in 1980, and he was able to get that car. And that was my first car. And I drove that back and forth to Stillwater. So that was a lot of fun.
Kind of like Smokey and the Bandit. What color was it?
It was silver. So it was about that same time frame. The only negative experience about that is that one of my first dates, I was dating Theta from Kerr Drummond, and went to go pick her up. And I parked my car out there, and I was, having nervous energy or trying to tell her what you're all about. And we knew each other a little bit from being active. I think we were part of the President's Leadership Count, the group that comes in as freshmen, as leadership people for OSU. And I forget the name of it now. But we knew each other, but I was still having nervous talk, and I talked about my car. Well, over Labor Day weekend, I was taking a golf class because in high school, I took 12 hours of college credit my senior year. And so I didn't have to take 18 hours a semester. And I wanted to take something kind of fun, learn how to play golf, do that kind of thing. And I would park on campus to go down to that golf class to be closer than I was at my fraternity. And by accident, I went home for the weekend with a buddy and left my car parked in the 15-minute loading zone at Kerr Drummond. And so when I got back, I had a bunch of tickets. So when this date occurred about 2 weeks later, I still was trying to figure out how to scrounge up the money and talk to my parents about it to get these tickets paid before they were due. Is when I had the date. And we came out of her dorm back to find my car, and it was gone. And I thought it had been stolen. So that was one of my first 2 weeks of school. And I think if that was the worst thing I did in school, that would be, I think that'd be a gift to my parents. But I was worked hard and had a lot of stuff going on, but that was one of my most fondest memories in hindsight.
It was impounded.
Yeah, it was. And it was, I thought it was stolen, and I called the campus police, and they said, we picked it up for a ticket. And of course, she looks at me like, you idiot. And so I don't think the date went terribly well at that point, but nonetheless, got the car back eventually.
So where did you first live when you came to campus?
I moved right into Delta fraternity. I don't think I even knew what a fraternity was that well. My dad was at a fraternity at Oklahoma City University, and he was the president of his class and of the fraternity too. Both on campus, his class, like they had a freshman president and sophomore president, and he also was president of his fraternity, and so he really was a big fan of those. But they didn't push me that way at all, and I went through the rush process. And luckily, some of the fraternities came out to Cordell to take us out to grab a burger and go to the lake and do things. And the Dell House is one that I felt very comfortable with, and was glad I joined it. It was a good fit for me, as it turns out. But moved right into campus and went from being an only child till I was about 11 and a half. And then I had a sister that was quite a bit younger, to having 120 people that could just come in and out of your room at will. And so I went from having just kind of a quiet growing up with friends and things, but at the house, it was pretty quiet, a chaotic situation. But I think it was the best thing for me.
Did the house win any of the homecoming decoration competitions while you were here?
We did. We were one of the very top ones. I think the years I was there on campus, we finished in grades first or second. I think farmhouse always was first almost. And one year we were close, but in athletics we were first or second every year. And I, even though I was an average athlete, I did compete for the house in several of those events. The ones that no one else did, the tennis, the racquetball. I think a ping pong I was able to give the house some points. I let the real athletes play football, softball, and swimming and in basketball. But it was kind of fun doing that.
Were you involved in other activities around campus?
I was. I became very active right off the bat. I was fortunate to be named one of the top 10 freshmen on campus, freshman men on campus my first year, and I was active with several groups. And it felt like I had to kind of hit the ground running through the speech and debate experience I had as a kid. I started meeting kids from all over, and I found that even though I had kind of some strange ideas and interests for Cordell, I found like-minded people were everywhere, and it was kind of a neat experience. And then through the campus activities, I was able to find others that had the same ideas I had, and that's how I met my wife. We were both in the I think I was an arts and sciences senator, and the arts and sciences council, and she was a student council, and she was as well. And that's how we met and started dating. So it was good that I was somewhat social, and the attorney took up a lot of time too.
How about, did you participate in like Alpha Week? It's called something else now, but Alpha Week.
I vaguely remember that. Everything that the fraternities, kind of all the freshmen had to participate in all that stuff. So I vaguely remember that, but I don't have any distinct memories.
Okay, and I have to ask, did you spend much time in the library?
Probably a combination of the rigor for political science wasn't that high, and then I ended up doing fairly well academically. It did not spend a ton of time in the library, but I did around exam time. I would get a room at the student union. They had 4 rooms they would let rent out for the day, and a bunch of people wanted to get those. So I'd get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and I would sit outside the student union until they opened, and I'd be one of the first 4 or 5 people. And I would go into those rooms, and I would spend all day long from the time they let us in the building till the time they closed studying for exams. And I went to class, took copious notes, and during that day of study, I would take my notes and distill them down to shorter and shorter versions until I had a 1-page document I could just glance at before the test. And I did the same thing the next day for the next exam. But I worked really hard during exam week, and I never missed class, and I sat up front where I couldn't goof off. And by doing those 2 things, and also having a little bit of a cushion because of 12 hours of credit before I ever came to Oklahoma State, I was able to get through, and it wasn't quite as challenging as maybe the architecture students or engineering students or pre-med or some of those had.
How had you acquired those study skills?
When I was, it's funny because when I was a kid, I remember thinking A's and B's were fine, and my dad was very smart and had phenomenal grades all the way through, and held himself to a high standard. But they let me kind of find my way. When I was a sophomore, I had a teacher that was in her first year of teaching, and her name was Dina Fleck at the time, Dina Fisher now, and I believe she just retired at Northeastern A&M as one of the as the provost, or one of the top people out there. But it was her first year of teaching. And somehow she taught history, current events, different things. And it became a challenge, not just to get an a 91 to get an A minus, or a 95 or whatever. It became a challenge to have the highest grade in the class. And it wasn't unusual that a group of us in this class would score in the 120 range for test. And we had a graduating class of 55 kids, but within those kids, I think we had 3 lawyers and a couple doctors. My best friend in school, he went off to OU, and that may have been one of the reasons I also went to Oklahoma State, is I wanted to have my own path. But he went to OU and was student body president, graduated at the 4 Point as the outstanding graduate of University of Oklahoma, went to Harvard Business School and is a venture capitalist. And as my mom liked to point out in recent, I guess in the 2008 to 2016 years, the Obamas actually stayed at his house a couple times as they passed through Austin, Texas. He's a venture capitalist and raised money for him and did stuff. So in this little town, and we had several other people that were really sharp, guys and gals as well, and we all competed pretty hard. And I think that plus the speech and debate kind of turned the light on that competing for grades, competing to see how much I could learn, would be fun. And also, same thing on campus, trying to find a way to get ahead and be successful, I knew would pay off in the long run with the skills I would develop, plus the opportunities that would open up to go to law school and do those things afterwards.
Was there one particular class that about ate your lunch?
Yeah, well, I remember I made 2 grades that weren't an A at Oklahoma State, and I remember them very, very well. The first one, I was right on the edge in a religion class with a great professor, Professor Thayer. I mean, I remember all the names, but he gave me a mark me down on the final, and it was just like points either way from getting a B plus or an A minus, because I wrote the word balance, but I didn't close the A in the word balance. And it looked like a U. And I went to tell him, I said, hey, obviously I meant, there's no way he goes, well, if I can't read it, it's not right. And the fact that I remember this, and we're talking, almost 40 years later, that I remember that, it was helpful to me. But at the time, I was just devastated. I was a sophomore and I was going to have a 4 point, and that was all there would be to it. And then the other one, my father passed away my sophomore year of college, which was devastating in a lot of ways. He had a business to deal with, and I was, just oblivious that he might have any kind of health issues. He was 41 and he was a type 1 diabetic, but when he perished, he had a heart attack in the morning, one Sunday morning. I think I was at church with a date, and roommate says, you got to call home, something big's going on. And aunt or uncle answered the phone and said, come back to Cordell. And back then it was the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. So I had a friend drive me back, and we zipped back in a couple hours, and I got to see him that day, but he passed that night. But I took off a little time from school. I missed a couple exams in a class I took to impress him. It was a business calculus class, and math and high-level math was not my forte. And my first test, it was real basic and introductory, I think, and I got a 96 on it. And so he said what he would do is he would count the final as like 75% of the grade in the class. The one test I took or the homework or whatever would be about 25%. All the homework was waived, but that final would count for everything. And I studied for that thing really hard, but even studying, I knew I wasn't getting it. And I walked in to take that exam, and I stared at the paper, and it could have been written in, an ancient language, hieroglyphics, and I would have done just as well. And I'm almost positive that I bombed that test so bad, and that professor was fortunate to have him, because I think he felt a little bit of mercy and knew that I did well the first time, and knew I was probably a decent student and didn't just crush me. But I got a C plus. And boy, that left a mark too. But I'm grateful for that experience now, because I realized that educators do have a heart. Both those educators had a heart, and they both taught me lessons that I think I've been able to use throughout my life.
Well, once you graduated from OSU, what did you do next? Take us through.
Once my dad passed away, I think a lot of fun and games went away. I dated some and had good friends in the fraternity, and we cut loose and had a good time, and I loved sports. But I got real serious about, even more serious about academics and a career path, because there wasn't a safety net at that point. I mean, the business was thriving, but you can't sell a car business under stressed circumstances. And I knew my sister had to get money for college, and I fortunately had a full ride to Oklahoma State, but there still were other expenses. And so I worked really hard, and I saved a lot. I washed dishes in my fraternity. I was worked in the summers. One summer I worked in D.C. for congressman as an intern, but most of the summers I went back home and worked bridge construction, whatever paid the most and had the most hours. And so I'd have enough money to move on to go to law school. And so I applied for law schools and was fortunate to be accepted to a couple schools. One of those was Georgetown. And when I was asking for letters of recommendation, I was also an intern for David Bourne in his D.C. office. And I asked him to write a letter of recommendation for me. And he called a couple times to check on me and see where I got in. And I was waiting for another school that was kind of my dream school to answer. And he said, if you come to Georgetown, I'd like you to work with my staff as a first-year student, and we'll take care of you. You'll have family up here. And I just said yes right away. And the other school, I was on the wait list. I wasn't accepted initially to Yale, is where it was. And that's where Bourne went to undergrad, was to Yale. And so I was on his staff the first year. So I went to Washington, D.C., and that was another huge move. Cordell to Stillwater was a massive move for somebody that was from a very, very small town. And again, for some of those who may be listening or viewing this, I tell my kids this a lot, but back in when you're growing up in the 70s, the world is extremely small. You've got 3 TV stations, and that's it. You've got one newspaper that's delivered sometimes a day late. That's it. No internet, no anything else. And to go to Stillwater was a huge expansion. Going to DC was, I mean, oh my gosh. But the staff in DC, they knew I was coming and took care of me. And I did kind of the entry level kind of grunt work out there, opening mail and sorting it and constituent responses and all. But it turned out to be a great experience. And it was good that I went there.
So you graduated from Georgetown in what year?
1989.
1989. And then did you come back to Oklahoma at that point, or
I did not. And candidly, I knew from the time I was a freshman or sophomore in college that I was going to leave Oklahoma and I would never come back except to this. I was 100% sure. Never do it. I mean, just not where I wanted to be. And so I had did well in law school, and I had offers from a firm in Oahu and in Hawaii that I was thinking about taking. I had another offer from a large firm in Southern California called Baker and McKenzie. And then the one I really liked and was hoping to get was a law firm in Dallas, Texas, that had a ton of employees. And I accepted the one in Dallas when they came through, and they were a firm called Haynes and Boone, but it's still one of the best firms around. And I worked there for about a year and a half, and I was given an opportunity to, I had a little bit of a specialty, and a firm from Santa Barbara, California. I came across them at some conference, I forget how they found out. I think they found out about me. I don't remember meeting them or how that actually happened initially, but they contacted me to see if I'd be interested in talking to them. And I'd heard about Santa Barbara, but I didn't know anything about it. I mean, it's just kind of a name in California. And boy, they wined and dined me, and I thought that was the best thing since sliced bread. And so I moved out to Santa Barbara. And I'll never forget the day, moved in and got settled into a little house, rented house in Montecito. That was, incredibly expensive for rent. It was a very expensive place to live. I decided to go for a walk, and I walked into town toward Santa Barbara and was walking through a park. And all of a sudden, I'm kind of looking left and right, not paying attention. And all of a sudden, this guy is on top of me, and it's not inline skates. It's actually rollerblades, wearing a pair of short yellow shorts, a white tank top, and like a rainbow headband with huge over-the-ear headphones. And I just snapped my head, and he goes, "Hey," and he goes around me, "Steve Martin." I mean, just incredible stuff. And Santa Barbara is one of those places. One of my clients, when I was out there for some land use issues, not anything else, but was Michael Jackson. Helped him get a white rhino into his ranch, and really had some great times. But I worked there for 4 or 5 years, and another firm hired me in San Diego. Did that, and I realized I wasn't saving any money. Had kids that were relatively young that were going to start sports soon. And I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, Oklahoma isn't that bad after all. I can live in a place where I'm comfortable, where we've got some room, and why pay for vacation, accommodations 365 days a year when you're working in a law firm and you're pretty much gone from daylight to daylight, and you're not out enjoying all the vacation things. You're just working and going to kids' YMCA events in the evenings and school plays. I can do that anywhere and vacation out to California later. So that's what I did. I moved back to Oklahoma in 1998.
1998. And did you already have a job lined up when you came back?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. When I talked to Senator Boren when I was coming back, and told him kind of what I had in mind, where I wanted to be. I initially wanted to come back and be in the U.S. Attorney's office and be a prosecutor. I was on a jury. Lawyers are never picked for juries. It just almost never happens. But I was picked for a jury when I was in San Diego. And the case was fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And it was so much more meaningful to me than taking endless depositions and the types of things that I was doing for a living. Great work, and a lot of good people do it. But for me, I just found it tedious and not really why I went to law school. And so I thought, I want to get into something that makes a difference, that really impacts people's lives. And so I came back to be in the U.S. Attorney's office. But because of the tragedy of the Murrah bombing that had happened and the prosecutions that were going on, the U.S. Attorney's offices in Oklahoma had overstaffed. And I was told that by the U.S. Attorney in Tulsa that I'd be given all consideration once a spot came open, but there's no guarantee. So a friend of mine that I got to know through Senator Boren was running for state treasurer. And he asked me to manage his campaign. And I'd done a lot of campaign work in the past. In fact, I put together a fundraiser at Senator Boren's request for a U.S. senator that was running for president back in, I think it was 1984 or 85 was his fundraiser, and it was Joe Biden. And so stuff like that. And I'd worked on the Hill, both in the House side and in the Senate side. And so I was familiar with what it would take to run a campaign. And the man I ran for was a man named Robert Butkin, and he drew no opponent, so it was an extremely easy race to deal with. But we had to get the word out to make sure we were ready for the election. And so I moved back to run his campaign. And then after he was elected, I almost immediately joined another campaign in Missouri for a man that was running for the U.S. Senate. He was the current Attorney General, and he did not win. But he did hire me to be an assistant AG, which I did that for about a year. And then Robert Budkin asked me to come back and join his staff, the state treasurer's office in Oklahoma. And that's where I helped create the Oklahoma College Savings Plan. And I've been in Oklahoma ever since, and been associated with the Oklahoma College Savings Plan ever since I came back to work on his staff to help with that.
Okay. And so brings up today, what are you doing today? And then we'll jump in.
Same thing. I helped create the Oklahoma College Savings Plan about a year and a half after we launched it. A company called TIAA, TIAA-CREF is the full name, but TIAA hired me to manage Oklahoma and then eventually other state 529 plans. So I've managed Connecticut, Oregon, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Mississippi, and Oklahoma's plan, and now work in Georgia as well. So I've worked with a lot of different states, but my license plate is OCSP, Oklahoma College Savings Plan, and has been since I first started doing this. A little over 22 years ago, I started working with College Savings Plan, but with TIAA-CREF, a little over 20 years.
Oh, that's impressive. So when you moved back in 1998, did you get back in touch with OSU in any way?
I did. I was wanted to be part of the sports environment, wanted to go to games and do all that fun stuff. I contacted people. My wife, was back here. She lived in Spain for a while after school before we got married, but she was back in Oklahoma and had strong ties. And her family was from Guthrie, and so we the two of us together, we really became, as a couple, we sought out opportunities and refreshed friendships that we had, and discovered people that we thought also had left that also had the same idea, like Oklahoma's not that bad. Once you get away, it's easier to come back. Some people are smart enough to know it right away. It takes others of us, it takes a while to really figure that out.
And what's your wife's name while we're here?
Her maiden name was Ringrose, Carol Ringrose, and of course Kerry Ringrose Alexander now. So.
And then did you date while you were in college here?
We did, and I so don't shoot me for saying this, but I guess my line is we dated in college. She was my most significant love interest by far when I was in college, and I was in her top 20. She was fairly popular and took mercy upon me. So that knowing her then kind of set up a meet again later, and then once we kind of settled down and had some more interest, it worked out to have a family and build a life together. But yeah, definitely was interested in her in college, but she certainly was focused on her career goals. So she got a master's in Spanish from Middlebury in Vermont, and then I took that and lived in Spain for a while and did a lot of cool things too.
And how did you pop the question?
Well, that's actually a fun story. So she had talked about wanting to go to some place called Machu Picchu, and I didn't even know how to spell it. And this is back when the internet was kind of, you didn't have resources. And I didn't know what it was, but on our first date after college, when we got back together, she's always said she wanted to go there. And I had to figure out what it was. And I said, oh, that sounds great, man, tell me more about it. And she was telling me, like, what in the world? Some castle in the jungle or ruins? And what she's talking about. So fast forward about 8 months later, we were dating pretty intensely. And she said, you want to go with me? My parents are going and we can all go. And we're going to do a 4-day hike along the old Inca Trail from a Cusco area all the way up to Machu Picchu, which is out in the jungle. It was covered in vines and hidden until a Yale historian named Hiram Bingham found it, and they renovated it, put a lot of stuff back together, and then it's been this classic site ever since. I had no idea what it was until close to the time we left. But I guess I had the wits to bring a ring with me, and I proposed to her after this 4-day hike at sunrise at the sun gate that overlooks Machu Picchu.
Wow. And no hesitation, yes.
Yeah, I was lucky about that too. That would have been a bummer.
All right. Well, let's just move on into our subject. Do you recall much about January 27th, 2001?
I do. It was a time in my life where I did feel kind of isolated and alone in a lot of ways. I had just left the treasurer's office and on January 17th. get 2 weeks off to start for TIA prep the last day of January of that year, 2001. And so I had about 2 weeks kind of off, and I was by myself in an apartment. My wife and I we had not started dating and married again. And I remember just sitting there, dumbfounded about what had happened and the tragedy and the senselessness, and how something you can start something as innocent as a day at a basketball game, and you can have something that changes the lives, not only ending the lives for 10 special men, but devastating the lives of those who loved and care for them, and even those from the community. That sense of loss that you have when most of these people were people that had, as I found out later, networks of friends and networks of family, and they weren't just isolated to what they did. They were really outgoing people that touched so many lives in the short time. Many of them were on this planet. Most of them were very young when the crash happened, 30 and below. A couple were a little bit older than that, but still it was devastating. And I remember just watching the coverage of it just all the time, because that fascinated me to see, how, I guess, just how something as simple as going to a basketball game can end in this kind of tragedy. And then thinking about how they felt and how their family members felt. And I lost my father when I was in college, and I was kind of seeing myself a little bit like some of the students that may have dated, been friends with, recent graduates. I mean, having a huge, unexpected, out of the blue loss, which my dad's was. There was no, was a diabetic, but there was no health circumstance that would have said it was coming. It really changed my path, and I can understand how it would have changed the paths of not only these men, but their parents, who were probably just a little bit older than I was when the crash happened. So it was one of those things that occupied my thoughts a lot when it happened.
And did you come up for the memorial service in the arena?
I did not, and I didn't really. I only had one real direct connection to the run. When I was in school at Georgetown, I wanted to be in sports. It really was a passion of mine to be in sports. And for a lot of reasons, later in law school, I did not get a full ride. I had some help in law school, but I had a lot of loans, and I decided I'd put off sports to a later date. But I was really fascinated with sports, and I was talking to my mom, and she said, you got to call this guy from Hobart. He's doing something with the NCAA. And find out what he thinks, maybe find out if he has any suggestions. And so I called the guy up, and he basically said, do you like sports? And I said, I love it. I went on, and he goes, do you want to continue to like sports? And I kind of laughed, and he said, if you go into sports as a career, it's unlikely you're going to use your law degree in ways that are part of the passions you're talking about. Now, enjoying sports is a lot different than negotiating stadium deals or doing whatever else. And what he said really helped kind of redirect my career, where I was thinking about something else for a career. And then I realized that I wanted sports to be something that would be entertainment, leisure kind of activities. And it was very important to me. But that was a man named Bill Hancock. And at the time, I knew the name just vaguely, but I believe at that time or shortly after, he was the head of the NCAA March Madness, the tournament. And then now he's head of the Bowl Championship Series. He's the one who handed the trophy to Nick Saban after the National Football Championship. But I remembered what a kind, thoughtful man he was. And I remember when I talked to him, not knowing his history, not having done the research I should have done about him, and how humble he was and talking to me and what he had to say, and me not realizing that he was somebody that had, climbed to the top mountain, had the highest amount of respect of anybody in sports I've ever come across. No one has ever said anything about Bill Hancock, and a lot of people it's come up a lot of places. It's anything other than he is the nicest guy in the world. And boy, what he's done for the NCAA. So I was that was my one connection, but I didn't really feel close enough to go up and attend. And I knew that the space would be limited and didn't seem appropriate for me to be there. Although in hindsight, I wish I would have.
So you began thinking about what you could do. So take us into the timeline for the run.
Not even a thought. Never occurred to me at that time. And got married. I got about a year later. My wife and I got married about a year later, and we had a child, and life's kind of going on. And I was at an all college basketball tournament in Oklahoma City when that used to occur every year. And it was there with a friend, and we heard there was a book on sale by one of the parents of someone who lost one of the kids from the plane crash. I said, let's go by and look at it and see. And I even said, I think I know the author of the book. Just a little bit. I'll say hi to him when I go by. And Bill and Nikki Hancock, Nikki's his wife, they were there at this book signing. And I picked up the book, and it was called, the book was titled Riding, R-I-D-I-N-G, Riding with the Blue Moth, and a very unusual title. And I took it home, and I read a fair amount. And I remember starting to read it after the game that night. And the first part of it, it is so gut-wrenchingly difficult to get through. It's almost painful to be kind of, on the shoulder of Bill and Nikki as they face this tragedy. And it's very difficult to get through those first 30 pages. I mean, it doesn't even compare to what their experience was like, but they did a good job of taking you back into those days and what it was like. Then after that, Bill talks about some of the dreams he had with his son, who was William Ransom Hancock. And one of those dreams was to do a coast-to-coast cycling ride. And they would dip the back wheel in the Pacific, and they would ride all the way to the Atlantic together. And he decided to honor his son. He would do the same thing just by himself, with his wife as kind of his support wagon for part of the time, and with other people maybe along the road. And what he did is he talked in very almost mundane, simple terms about what he did each day and where he went, who he came into contact with, and what that experience was like. And within like 3 months, the germ of the run kind of crystallized in my mind, because it seemed to me, well, and the title of the book is The Blue Moth. When Bill was young, I think he had a grandmother from Kansas that would talk about the north winds we get in Oklahoma that come down that kind of in February that are just brutally cold and dark days. And that was what she called the Blue Northern. There's a Blue Northern coming in, a Blue Northern coming in, and the Blue Moth is what he thought she was saying. And so that's where he got the name. And I understood it that he was riding his bike with this depression, this sadness, with this longing for his son, and that the way he got through that was putting one step in front of the other. It was a cycling trip, but one step in front of the other, and paying attention to the small details, and each day adds up to progress. And that's when I thought that maybe a sport event of some kind. First, it was going to be a cycling event, but those are pretty complicated to put together. But then a 10K run for the 10, it came out of that idea.
10K. So it's more than that now. It's a 5K.
It is. Almost the remarkable thing about it, and I definitely, it was an exciting time to come up with the idea. It was an exciting time to talk to people about it. But there have been so many people that have taken what my vision of the run was and made it into something that is so much greater. I was in a group called Leadership Oklahoma, and there are a bunch of OSU people there and a bunch of runners in there. And I initially thought it'd be fun to have a 10K run. And I really thought, a buddy of mine in that leadership class owned tumbleweeds at the time. And I thought, we can just have a party at Tumbleweeds, and we can run out to run 5K to a stake in the road and run back, and that'll be the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And as I started talking to people about what the run could be, the first person I called was Bill, and asked him if he'd mind if I contacted Karen Hancock, who at the time of the crash was the OSU women's soccer coach. And after that, she voluntarily took a step back, because she and William Ransom Hancock, one of the 10 that died, they had a daughter named Andy that was born, and she was a few months old at the time of the crash. And she thought her time would be better spent being involved with the OSU soccer team and taking care of Andy. And that really was the first major conversation. But after that, she seemed to like the idea. I honestly can't believe she met with me. I called her up and kind of told her what was going on. And she seemed a little bit like, okay, I don't know what this guy wants to do or what the angle is, but for some reason it clicked. And she told me to talk to one of the athletic department people. And from then it just kind of took off and away it went. But we had a couple of volunteers join the run within the first meeting. A couple of them did. And then others came in a little bit later that have taken the run to places that I never would have dreamed of. My co-chairs for the run are Jason Pogue and Becky Schiffely, and they've had so many cool, creative ideas. In fact, the way we've worked together a lot of times is I'll come up with an idea, like I had an idea for a scholarship, and they're the ones that make it happen. And boy, they work their tails off. And then those two combined with Sean McCabe, who at the time of the crash, he was on the OSU cross country team coaching staff. And he kept hitting me up saying, I'd like to help. And he looks at darn young. I thought he was a student. I had no idea of his experience in this world. and he came on, and he became the essentially the director of the competition, for the event. And he's been those three that we each have kind of different areas we work in, but those three have been such amazing people to have attached to the project. And so it went way beyond put a stake 5K from tumbleweeds and run around and come back.
Was it a challenge or difficult to get other family members involved beyond Karen?
It wasn't, and we kind of did things thoughtfully. And this is the part where I was kind of setting things up before we had our first meeting. But our first meeting, I talked to several at Oklahoma State, and I thought it would be cool to have Eddie Sutton, if he was willing, be our honorary chair, and he was. And so when you have an event that Eddie Sutton's attached to, you almost automatically have more credibility. I mean, I'll put it this way: we had far more credibility than we deserved at that point, because it was just kind of me and an idea. And talked to Karen, and had Eddie became involved, and that was it. And it was one of those things that when we had that first meeting, you don't know where it's going to go or what's going to happen. By that point, we decided to be on OSU's campus, that the university would support it and be behind it. We knew that the city of Stillwater would be involved, and in that first meeting, we had a really good turnout, partly based on the fact that Eddie Sutton was there, but also based on the fact that I really feel like, for 5 years, the meeting was 4 years after the crash, but for all this time, there's all this kind of pain, and how do you deal with grief if you're a friend, if you're a family member, or if you're just a student that was there. I mean, if you're on campus, this affected you, whether you were a recent graduate or you're right there, and it made a huge difference. A lot of the families, the Weiberg family, and Jared Weiberg was one of the 10 that was in the plane crash. His dad and his mom and dad have been in sports forever. His dad is a coach and administrator for a long time. And Jared was on the OSU basketball team, was part of the OSU basketball team, coaching staff, doing a ton of stuff with players. And his brother was a guy named Chad Weiberg that was also heavily involved in sports. And I think that time he was at Kansas State as an assistant athletic director. So a lot of these people, and of course, Chad Weiberg is the new athletic director at the Oklahoma State University, for those maybe who are catching this down the road, a few years. But so many of these people had basketball, in their blood, and kind of had understood what these sporting events were like and how this might be something that would work. So I think that the appetite, once they knew Coach Sutton was attached to it, and once they knew Bill Hancock maybe said a few nice words to get things going to others that I'm not even aware of, to be honest, they bought in pretty quickly, and we came up with something we thought would be a respectful way to make sure that they're remembered. And I think we've accomplished that right off the bat to the present.
How did you come up with the name?
Well, I mean, the phrase "we will remember" is one that OSU had promised. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I knew that the administration, both those that were there at the time, Dr. Halligan, the athletic director, it was the OSU president, Harry Birdwell, or the OSU president that was there when the run started to be created in Burns Hargis, and Mike Holder as the athletic director. They cared deeply about these 10 men and about their families and about this legacy and about the promise to remember. But to be real candid, I don't know that there was a real opportunity for the public to engage with that, with that memory, a way for the public to say, we remember too. These people were important to us. And there was a bell ringing on January 27th in the evening to honor those who passed, and they were honored at basketball games. All those things were in place, and OSU did an amazing job. But I think what we hit on is we had an event where people came out and they had fun. I mean, and the proceeds that we've been able to use to do all kinds of things, that's a tremendous blessing. But people came out and they had fun, and we had, Denver Mills, who was one of the pilots. His widow was one of the volunteers, and we had 4 or 5. Kendall Durfee's mom was one of the volunteers, and several others have been as well. But I remember them at one of our first runs sitting at a registration table. And while they're sitting there, everybody's nervous to come in to get ready for the same day registration. And they have no idea that these two, very pleasant, polite older women that, not older women, but they were younger than I am now when they were doing this. But women that are older than, of course, than our volunteers, a lot of them are students, that these two women are people that were directly affected by losing, in one case, a spouse, and the other, a son. And, everybody's excited, jabbering away, and off they walk. And you could just see the excitement that all these, people had and how strongly they felt about coming to this event, making it something special, what that meant to the families, those who came to participate in the run, those who came to volunteer, and those who watched. They could see this excitement in the fact that it's not just a few people and it's a bell ringing. It is a big event with hundreds and hundreds of people out there. Sometimes in the 3,000 to 4,000 range when you count the overall crowd, and they're all there because they have a passion. Some of them, I'm sure, have a passion for running. Some of them have a passion for OSU, but they all care deeply about these 10 men, and they're all going to be educated about the 10 men we lost by being part of this event.
Mm. And do you remember about how many were involved in the first one?
Well, and see, this is where I get in trouble with my Jason Poe gives me a hard time because I tend to embellish it after the fact, and then as we get ready for the next year, I set a little bar that we can always exceed. But I think we started off in the 800 range the first year, and it grew. And then I think the 10th anniversary of the plane crash back in 2011. And that was a huge year for OSU in a lot of ways. That was the football team, of course, was really good during that stretch, and there's a lot of cool things going on. That was a year that the university brought back so many people that were on the team. Doug Gottlieb was on that team. There were Andre Williams. There were a whole bunch of the players that came back and brought back a lot of the extended family so that they could be there for a celebration that year. Because of that, I think in particular, we spiked, I think 2,400, and that's been our one of our highest runs so far has been in that number.
Well, did it initially start as a fundraiser, or did that just come along the way, happen along the way?
Somebody asked me at some point, what do we do with the proceeds? And mm-hmm. My goal was, we're not going to go out and solicit. We're not going to have. I love the runs that are well established and that have a tremendous fundraising arms. But that wasn't what I was doing this for. I wanted an event that the families would understand it's about those 10 men, it's to celebrate them. And never once in the history of the run has there been any logo on these shirts for any company, any business, anything else. It's just been pictures of these pictures or names or both of the 10 men we lost, the name of the race, the date, and that's been it. And so we've never had, and I don't think we ever will. I mean, you never say never, but I doubt we ever do at this point. And so it's always been about these 10 men. So I actually thought that if we put on a really good event, we'll probably spend everything on, awards and shirts and logistics and all that stuff. And it will kind of break even and maybe have a little bit of a cash reserve we'll keep back. I had no idea we'd be able to raise, at this point, close to $500,000 that's been given in one form or the other to Oklahoma State and to the Oklahoma State Counseling Department. But when someone asked, what if we have money? We better have something set up just in case. And it's you want to be responsible. And the first thought I had was OSU counseling. And I had a great deal of respect for counseling in general at that point in my life, that it can change lives. And I'd seen it help a lot. My sister, especially after my father died, she was 9 at the time. When I was at Oklahoma State, I didn't know we even had a counseling department at Oklahoma State. And I'm sure they did everything they could to let students know. But even if I would have known about it, I think there was a stigma set up for me that I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go see a counselor. And that really informed a little bit that experience kind of informed me as to some challenges that there might be on campus. And it was a great chance, I thought, to kind of have an event that might change the lives of current students, as well as staff, faculty, administrators who use OSU counseling services, but might help them realize that if they need help, whether it's something as seemingly trivial, but can be devastating if you're in college, like the breakup of a boyfriend, girlfriend, or a bad grade, or something like, father dies when you're a sophomore in college, or you have a plane crash where you lose a teammate, a friend, someone that you've worked with. Counseling services do exist. There shouldn't be a stigma. There is, your physical health. Nobody blinks about pursuing things that would help their physical health. Why wouldn't we all pursue things that would help our mental health? And so even if we didn't raise money for them, I thought we could publicize and give them an opportunity to reach a larger audience and awareness with what we did. And the fact that so many people signed up, someone asked me, how long do I think the run would last? I mean, candidly, I thought we might have an event that would probably start off with a small crowd, build to a point, and then just gradually fade, and it'd be gone in 5 years. And if you look at the history of running events, that's pretty much what happens. And the fact that this didn't is 90% due to the fact that people still care deeply about the 10 men that we lost. And I'd say another 10% is a combination of the efforts of people like I said, Jason Pogue, Becky Shipley, Sean McCabe, countless other volunteers that have been involved with this run that work so hard to make it special. And the fact that OSU, I think, as an institution and as individuals and as administrators, I think we all like to think of our school as a family. Every school says that. Hey, it's a family. I mean, you hear that. But going back again, when I was in 4-H, I mean, I felt that. And it felt different than it did at other schools. And it felt right, and it was home to me. And I think that the fact that we have this need to take care of each other and pull together as a family, that I think is fueled a run that I suspect now will go in perpetuity. I hope it's around for somebody else to take over, in 10, 20 years, whenever I decide to hand off the baton and the other top co-chairs do. And you have kids that are probably not even born yet that'll be involved in the run, in 20, 30 years.
Well, as the founder, do you participate in it each year?
I want to be at the awards ceremony, and I'd like to get home before dark. So with my athletic ability, I think me going out to run would slow things down way longer than people would have patience for. So I think someone asked if I was a runner, and I've done other sports, but I've run one competitive event in my life. And it was when I was in the best shape of my life in law school, basically because there's not a lot of food to eat, and I ran every night. So it was in great shape. And I think I got under the 1 hour mark for a 10K just by that much. And I realized that I'd be much better off helping kind of organize and keep things on track than getting out there running around. So maybe one day I'll go out and give it a shot if that works, but I never have.
How many volunteers does it take these days to pull it off?
Say one thing, last year we were really concerned, and unfortunately last year we had to do a virtual only run because of COVID. And it's hard. It's hard not to get together in person, because I think that's what we all that gathering. Whenever Coach Sutton, of course, died in this past year, and he was always one of the ones that would come up and talk to the crowd before we started. We've had others do that as well. But we've had such a great crowd of people attending, and we've had a tremendous number of volunteers. It kind of depends on kind of their availability, but for the day itself, 200 to 300 volunteers is about where we've been most years. And if you think about COVID and some people have lost loved ones because of COVID, 500,000 and counting in the United States alone have. So I know a lot of families that see this may be touched directly by that. So anything else is kind of trivial by comparison when you compare what they've lost to what inconveniences or disappointments we've had. But I think that moment after we get everybody gathered, all the runners are kind of jogging and they're waiting, to start the race. And I get a chance to say a couple words, and we pause for 10 seconds of silence to remember the 10. And then everything is just quiet. You almost can hear or feel a thump of, the 2,000-3,000 people that are there as an audience, volunteers and runners, all their hearts beating as one for these 10. That's hard to replicate in a virtual race. And I think one of the things I'm most hopeful for is that when we get back to the live events, we'll have that same enthusiasm from people attending and the same enthusiasm from the runners that want to be involved in it and the volunteers.
Say it typically is like the third weekend or third Saturday in April.
Yeah, and again, if I listed the mistakes I made and the dumb things that I've tried to do that my co-chairs have taught me out of, that list would take up hours. But one of the things I am proud that I put together initially that I thought was insightful was picking a date and sticking to it. And we thought the third Saturday of April every year would be the best time to go, because you could do it January 27th. And that would be fine as well. But there are things going on that day, and with short days and the weather, students, it made it really complicated. We figured we wanted to avoid the finals, so that students needed to study, would have, even if they were taking a half day off, it still is a chunk of their time. We wanted to avoid that. We wanted to try to position ourselves in advance of the amazing Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon. that started not too long before ours did. And that event itself is one that people from all over go to, but a lot of Oklahomans actually use our race as a training race for the Memorial Marathon. So we pick the third Saturday of April every year, and we stuck to it every single year. It may vary some in the future if Oklahoma State has needs that we need to coordinate with, but that's what we've done. Last year's virtual run, people virtually ran that day or whenever they could. This year, in this April, we're recording this May 5th, and the virtual run, the year before, I know people did it at their own time. The run this year, because COVID was still going strong as we're starting to look towards an April run date this year, we moved that date back to August 28th. And so we're hopeful in 2022 to go back to our third Saturday of April and stick with that going forward.
The one in August hopefully will be face to face. Is that what you're thinking at this point?
That's our expectation. And if you think about this, the worst thing we could ever do, just it would be a catastrophe, is to have an event where you have people exhaling and yelling to cheer each other on, and that out of that you have even one person suffer some type of tragic illness, and that's what we wanted to avoid. So we were really careful about it. I think we all wanted to go forward. It was very difficult to say we're not going to do it this year, but then we thought about the risk that we would expose people to, and you have a lot of people come out to this run that they may not be runners necessarily. There are people that are enormously healthy that have succumbed to COVID. But there are also a lot of people that are first-time runners, or people that really aren't in the running community that want to be part of this event because they think it's important to them. And so you're exposing all kinds of people to possible danger. And with COVID going on, I think we made a good decision then. It was so hard not to have it. And I think we made a good decision to postpone it this year. And our expectation is that we'll have it back up in next April, and that the August 28th date will be one in person, and everybody will be able to join together, and hopefully we'll all be vaccinated and be able to have a run just as always.
Well, did you have a pretty good showing for the virtual one?
We did. It was it was closer to the initial race we had. I believe we had somewhere around 1,000 that did the virtual run, a little bit less than that, I think, which I think is astonishing. That was probably double what I thought it would be. And it was nice, and we had a nice shirt that people had, and we sent out everything, in the mail, and it was a little bit different for us, but people wanted to be involved in it. There are a lot of people that have been in this run every single year, and so they wanted to do it no matter what. So I think a lot of people that were, we have a pretty good sized walk-up crowd typically, and usually there's a baseball game that night. Sometimes it's you do the run in the morning, you have a spring game in the afternoon, you have a baseball game or a softball game that night. And so we have a lot of people that make a day of it that are more people that say, hey, I want to do this while I'm there. And so they may sign up in the days before, a couple days before, and that's it. So we don't have a walk-up crowd for one of these virtual events. But that'll change when we get back to the in-person portion.
Well, you also do an optional fun run, 1 mile, right, for those of us who are not marathon runners.
Well, and there's a 5K. So you can do a 5K, 3.1 miles, the 10K, the full 6.2 miles, and we have quite a few people do the fun run, and that's something that it's hysterical to watch. We've got kids, we've got all kinds of people. It's really a lot of fun. And the other runs we have, it's the state's official 10K event. It's not just a 10K run; it's the state's official 10K. So Sean McKay began to work to make that happen. There's a professional race management company we've hired to do the timing and scoring. It's got the highest tech chip timing system. All kinds of things are set up. We've got ways that you can line up, and we'll have someone that'll have a sign up that says if you're running at a 6-minute mile pace, you're way up at the front. And some people are even faster than that. But those are pretty quick people. And if you're running a 12-mile pace, maybe you're going to start at the back so that no one has to weave through a whole bunch of people if they're going to try to keep up that pace. You're able to go off at the approximate time you think you'll finish and how you think you'll do. So it's fun to watch, and I think there's a spot for everybody in this thing that makes some sense.
About when did it become an official event?
It was sanctioned right off the bat. It's been a sanctioned 10K, a 5K event since day one. So it's been that way. But I think it was named the state's official 10K in the last about 4 years ago. And if memory serves, it was sometime around 2017 that it became that.
Are there any particular years that you have highlights from that you remember really more than others?
I got two memories that really stand out to me. One's funny, and then one's kind of more meaningful. One year, we've never had rain. Never had rain. Beautiful days. It's threatening. Nothing happens until about either 2 or 3 years ago. And that day it was blurry and it was raining. And we have a lot of people that take photos out on the course. And so I don't see everything because I don't see much of anything besides what's going on at the start line and the finish line. Because I stay in those areas, walkie-talkies and those kind of things. And we have spotters around the field to direct people and make sure everybody's okay and all that. But I don't get out there. So I don't see all those, and most of the shots are the same. Someone going like this as they run by the camera, and that's always the same every year. The year it rained, people were just drenched. And I thought, oh, it's so miserable. And some of these photos come in and you see, we have a wheelchair event every year. You see people out there that are, all stages of their running career and ability level, running and smiling and waving just like they were on the days it was sunny. It was remarkable to see the attitude and how upbeat and how enthusiastic people were. So that one really stands out. The other one is one of my friends, a gentleman named Randy Thurman. He was with me when I was kind of coming up with the idea, and I talked to him quite a bit about it. Very smart man, and a few years my elder, but a very smart man. And he got the domain name for Remember the 10. He said, you better get this. And he got it for us and he got it set up. And he told it, and he's an avid runner. He's run in Boston 2 or 3 times and really sharp guy. He tells a story, and I hope I don't bungle it, but the course used to come where you would do a sharp left turn off Knobloch, onto Knobloch to hit the finish line. So everybody was kind of out of sight. And then you round this corner about 2 blocks away. I can't remember if that's College or which street it is, but it's one just between like the corner where you enter GIA and then going back to the north on Knobloch. It's the first street there. And as he rounds the corner, people are cheering and clapping, crossing the line. And I think he runs 8-minute miles, maybe somewhere in that time frame. And he rounds the corner, he starts running and people are cheering. But boy, people are just getting more and more excited and fired up, and they're yelling and he's like, oh my gosh. And he starts running harder and he's smiling and pumping his fist, and the crowd starts to roar, and he's thinking, this is the coolest feeling I've ever had. And all of a sudden, as he gets close to the finish line, Pistol Pete runs right by him to cross at the same time. So all this time, he was out there thinking the crowd's supportive, don't get me wrong. But they were watching Pistol Pete with that hat coming chucking down there and finishes. It was really pretty cool. And he's a pretty humble guy, but I can see that happening because people do cheer a lot. But that would have been. I didn't see that happen, but I can visualize it.
I'm thinking that hat's pretty heavy. He surely didn't run all of that way with that hat on.
Well, he must have been running a little bit about the time that they got in the home stretch, and he may have just walked. I don't remember where Pistol Pete was, but he may have just walked up to join. And we've had OSU's been. I mean, I say OSU's been supportive. This is an OSU event at this point. I mean, it really is just ingrained as part of the OSU community and the athletic department. Coach Holder, all the work that he did all those years to kind of help the families and help with the remembering, and all those players, everybody else. We've had such a good result. Pistol Pete's been there every year too to start the runs. In the first few years, we were a lot closer to Gallagher Iba, where the start line was. It was smaller then. Once it got bigger, we moved off over to one of the streets behind the campus. And when it started next to Gallagher Iba, Pistol Pete would shoot that shotgun for the thing to go off. And every year I'd tell people, hey, just move away. It was so loud. You could hear it everywhere on campus. So we've had a lot of kind of funny experiences like that as well. But one other quick story, that when the run started, there was a friend of mine named Tracy Shirley. And he actually was the first kind of race coordinator for the competitive part of it. And he'd run Boston every year. And he was OU fan, and he was my Leadership Oklahoma class. And he wanted to be involved. And he had a lot of ideas about how to make it go. And about 6-7 years into the run, he was flying back on business. He was his family was in the. In fact, his sister was Natalie Shirley, who was the OSU OKC president for quite a while. So OSU was in his family. But anyway, he was flying back on business, and he was a pilot in his small plane, and he died in a plane crash. And these happen more often than what I ever realized. A number of people that have died in small plane crashes. And so one year, the year after he passed, we named the Volunteer of the Year award the Tracy Shirley Volunteer of the Year award. And Tracy's son came to give away the first award and say a few words about his father. And that one stands out a lot too, because it was a way where you could just see there was a vehicle already set up for people that are going through tragedies and pain to lock in and be part of something where they know they have family immediately. And I've heard that from a lot of other people as well. Hey, I lost someone I loved that year, and I ran with their spirit with me. It wasn't related to the reason for the run in the first place, the plane crash, but I knew I was in a community where I was safe, where people knew how I felt, and where I just felt at home being part of this run. And I knew that I could feel that spirit with me when we did it. And you hear that a lot, but that was one that was very specific. Someone who'd been there from the time the idea came up, was there when the race got started, hugely involved, had run in the race. By then he'd gone back to do other things, and Sean McCabe had taken over full-time. Sean was always heavily involved, but Tracy was always running the bit every year. And at his funeral, it was something they talked about quite a bit, about how much he enjoyed being part of the run and helping create something like that. And so you could just see that arc. And now when we give away that award every year, it makes me smile and think of Tracy. And I'm sure a lot of people smile and think about someone they've lost during the run, while the focus is always on the 10. Part of the focus is on grief and grief recovery, and how that if you just put one foot in front of the other, you can move through the day, and eventually those clouds will part. You'll have the kind of peace, and that you can smile when you think of your loved one that passed.
Lessons for all of us. Yes. How old has been the oldest person that has participated? Do you know, just off the top of your head?
I'm sure the person wouldn't want me to say their name, but there are a couple people I can think of off the top of my head that I'm almost positive are in their 80s. But I believe in the fun run, at least, Bill Hancock's mother has been was an active participant until very recently in the fun run, and out there for her grandson and for her son, kind of remembering what they both went through with the loss of her grandson, Will Hancock. And we had a lot of my kids were in strollers, in the run every year with my wife going around, when they were just tiny as can be. So that would be the age span, would be mid 80s all the way down to, very young as you can imagine almost.
It's been an amazing event. I think I did it one time, the fun run. Yeah. And
I think it's something that
started.
I think it's something that's part of OSU's culture, and I think it speaks about something unique to Oklahoma State, and that's why we hope to. None of us are paid. This is not no one gets paid for anything, and we all, I think, all of us in our own ways contribute to the run success with our time, or at the extent we can with our own contributions to kind of leave that wood pile a little bit higher than we found it. And my hope is that this run will be a source of education. When I lost my father when I was 19, and then I lost my mother a couple months ago. And the one thing that the first event, it was just chaos. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I remember dealing with it and all the bad ideas, ways that people deal with loss, that if they don't have someone that's a professional around to help, a counselor. The drinking age was 18, and I never had much to drink at all, but a combination of dealing with the pain in ways that weren't productive, doing things that weren't getting me to where I needed to be. I wasn't aware of the counseling services that would help. And the pain that I felt, it was hard to even identify what it was that bothered me the most. Now that I've been part of the run all this time, and I've heard so many people from the OSU counseling department, attend, be part of the run all these years, I know that one of the biggest things that people are concerned about, especially when someone dies young, is that their loved one will be forgotten. And to have a race where you have a website, you got shirts, you got all, these 10 men will never be forgotten. I think that's the best gift we can give to them. And that's what I think the biggest concern is that the person they love, the memory of them will be lost, and that they'll be all alone. And this is one of those runs that, even though people running may decide, oh, I got a shirt with, Eddie Sutton's name on it, or a shirt with, that shows Oklahoma State, or my buddies are running, or my, the girl I like, or the gal I like, is going to be out there. They may run for those reasons, but when they come to it, they can be educated about who these 10 men were. And so we can carry on our primary purpose to educate people. And if you think about it, it used to be that, well, some people weren't even born when the run started. Well, now, I mean, the run we have in August, you'll have people attending college that were 2 or 3 years away from being born when the plane crash happened. They would have been born in possibly as 2014, 2015. At that stage to be 17 or 18 when the run starts. But so we have a lot of people to be educated because we have this event, and that'll be kind of the legacy is we get them there so we can tell them about it, but also tell them about what the OSU culture is about.
Well, and plus, from what I understand, a lot of the funding goes to provides resources, various resources for the counseling services.
It did, and we whenever I brag on the run, I mean, I always have to say there have been so many people that have made this a lot higher. Some events, you've got that driving force, the one person that's just a dynamo, and they come up with the idea. They're in everything from that's not this run. This run is a bunch of highly qualified people that have passion for Oklahoma State and passion for this event, and that they the authority I gave them initially, they've run with and created kind of things that I never even conceived of. So whenever I give credit, the partners I have that make this thing work, I have to say that it could not happen, I don't think, if it was just one person. My ideas weren't that good in some of these areas. The things they've done have improved it so much. But one of the cool things that's happened as a result of this collective work, volunteers, families, and those of us who are active year by year, is that funding was provided at Oklahoma State that allowed counselors to be trained in specialized grief training. And that training was conducted and had recently been completed by the first wave of counselors when the other plane crash happened. When we had the two, Kurt Budke and his assistant coach, and the two pilots that died in that plane crash. And the counselors were able to use that training to help those people, but more significantly, as far as the number of people, those resources are available on OSU's campus now, and they weren't before. So if someone does have a parent die when they're in school, or does have just whatever it is, extreme grief based on someone's been diagnosed with illness, whatever it is, there's specialized training that not only Oklahoma State has to give to families that suffer from the loss of a loved one, like the 10 or like the 4 that came later, but also for other tragedies. They've actually, Oklahoma State's counseling department has actually gone to other campuses when things have happened to be resources for them as well. So when you think about the 10 and you think about their legacy as remarkable individuals, and I actually, as in this interview on my computer screen, we have to do this during Zoom because of COVID, I have the pictures of those 10 men right below, where the camera is. And in looking at those men and seeing their faces, you know how remarkable they were. But because of their memory and the energy behind it, there are countless lives that have been changed, and the volunteers play a role in that. So I'm sure there are a few examples I know of that are too personal to mention about people on campus, either now or before, that have come in with a crisis, and counseling may have directed them to something that would be self-destructive into something that would be productive in a way to process their grief and the legacy, and how so many people have found a way to grieve for people they lost, but still to move forward with their lives and honor their memory by living the best lives they can. That example is something, plus that it's specialized grief training that affects these students, faculty, administrators, et cetera. And I hear those stories quite often from those people that come up to me and say, hey, I heard about this or heard about that, and I thought counseling was for somebody but not for me. But they're associated with this. I gave it a try, and it actually helped me get past where I was and get to a place where I could rejoice for the time I had with my loved ones while I still had a heavy heart and missed them. It wasn't such a dark day every day. It was a day that it was getting a little bit better and a little bit better over time.
Comes back to that family aspect, I guess, reaching out.
Absolutely.
Do you have a steering committee that's involved in some of the decisions like that, how the money's spent or that sort of thing?
We do. We actually, again, the core group of this, and there are several others in the core group that I would be remiss if I started naming one, I would not name them all. But the core group of this, I had the idea about the scholarship, and that was one of those things that Jason Hogue, who works for Oklahoma State, he's he's an executive, honcho, and accounting, all kinds of stuff with Oklahoma State. But he's also passionate about this. He was passionate about the people that died. He's always been passionate about Oklahoma State sports. Once I had the idea of the scholarship, he picked that up and created the rules, and we talked a lot about it, but he created everything and he administers that each year. We have a steering committee that meets, typically we meet 2 or 3 times in person before the run in typical years. And part of that is to, just get us all in a room to talk and organize, figure out what we needed different, what's going to be changed. But also it's a good chance for us to maybe can make connections with other people who want to be at that level, who want to be not just volunteering and doing things that we wouldn't survive without our volunteers, maybe to take a leadership role and pick up a piece of this thing and make it their own. And so Becky Shipley initially did all the registration, and she did it for the wrestling camps, and she has a private employer that she does this as one of her passions. She did the registration. Jason took it over at some point. Nate Nickelman is now the registration person that works for OSU as well. But they've moved into areas where they head up something they care a lot about. Jason kind of heads up our meetings, our steering committee meetings, and he also oversees the run. Becky does the shirts and does a lot of the graphics and a lot of the other things that make the run work. Sean has his little area of where he's doing the competition, and we all get together to kind of talk about it. So we have a steering committee that is kind of that core group, plus others that really want to be more involved than just race day and race day only. If there weren't a couple hundred people that wanted to do race day and race day only, no run would ever exist for that kind of sport. But we really need to have probably 10 to 15 people that are pretty involved in it. We have volunteer coordinators. We have people that head up, some of the sponsorship and other areas. Even though we don't have sponsor logos and shirts, we do have people that sponsor and contribute to make the run possible. And those people, we definitely want to work with them to make sure that we understand, what their needs are and what they need to have happen. And there's got to be, there are tons of things that have to happen to make a run go off. And that's where we need all these volunteers, both the one-day volunteers and the ones that really want to spend some time to create something and put their own kind of stamp on it and make it that much better.
Once you finish one, do you get a little bit of a break before you start planning for the next one?
We do, and I wouldn't say we have it down to a science, but we are pretty organized with what we're doing. We try not to take on too much each year. So typically we'll have an idea maybe that comes up to us as we're having these steering committee meetings, like in November, December, January. And that idea we'll start working on, even though we know we won't launch that new functionality or that new aspect of the run until the following race, 15 months later. Because a lot of things take about 15 minutes to create and build out the right way. If you have a run and you want to do, let's say this year we're talking about doing teams for the August run, and you got to figure out prizes, you got to figure out how exactly to code the registration forms so people will be collected, and so you can efficiently announce the winners. Not say, well, we'll let you know in a week or two how you get. I mean, there are a lot of things that go into it. It takes a 15-month ramp up in some cases, and we've done that. Everybody does take a break closer to the time, and I think the week of the run, there's a lot of stuff being collected and staged on campus. A lot of times it's underneath Galgride, because those who have not been to the run yet and don't know a lot about it, it's around OSU's campus. It's a remarkable course, a one of a kind course. We block off streets. In most cases, we block off streets. Some cases, just a few lanes of traffic in some of the farther points. But you're running around campus. So we have to have a lot of stuff staged that are there, usually underneath Boone Pickens Stadium. Mm-hmm. And those things are pulled out, starting like 4:30 in the morning on race day. And race day, I always take a picture. There's a Baptist church right next to where the race kind of gets organized where the finish line is. And I take a picture at sunrise every year of that steeple. As you see that church and the sun coming up from the east right over the top of it, it's remarkable. But from the time we get up, those who live there from their house, and those of us like me who live in the city, stay overnight at 4 something in the morning and get out there to go to work until the time we're picking up cups and wrapping things up. It goes like that. It seems like it takes forever for it to come on, and then it's over so incredibly fast. I think we probably need to do a better job of getting together to kind of celebrate and rejoice in what's happened. But, we do that a little bit. We give away, every year we give away a check for $20,000 to OSU Counseling out of proceeds from the previous year's run. And we do that usually at the game where the 10 are honored, the basketball game where the 10 are honored, on or about January 27th. So we get together for those kind of events to celebrate, which are much more straightforward events, but kind of festive. The run is a lot of work by a lot of people.
And some of the other changes that have happened over the years? Have there been that many changes?
We initially had, some are very small, but people have told us they're important to them. One was we didn't have prize money initially. And again, that goes back to my thinking. My thinking was this should be something without logos. Without any kind of sponsor logos. It needs to be a celebration of those 10 men. And that's it. We're going to celebrate those 10 men in their lives. And eventually we're going to maybe have some money to help out OSU counseling. But, turning the focus to a competitive event was something I kind of resisted. Well, that was idiotic on my part, to be honest, because you want people to come. You want people to be there, and you want it to get publicity so that people are aware of it. And having a competitive event makes that happen. And that's one where Sean finally educated me enough that I understood what that was. But having prize money was a significant part of it. Our trophies and those types of things have evolved over the years. The overall winners, wheelchair, male, female, 10K, 5K, they all get the bust of the kneeling cowboy, like the one that's in the memorial lobby. It's white on a nice plaque, and it's a real substantial thing. And I think the people get it have a place of honor at their homes. I'm positive. And the Tracy Shirley Volunteer of the Year is the same way. His name and then the name of the winner of that award is on that plaque every year. And those are big things. Those are things that kind of came in later. The Volunteer of the Year award was one that came in later. Some of the aspects about the run has changed fairly significantly about what parts of the course we want to have through around campus and what's going to go through campus because of campus construction. There's a lot of small things that change, but I'm a big believer in if it's working well, make small changes and just do what you know is going to improve it. Keep it simple. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Occasionally someone will say, we really should have a cycling event, and people come up to me and said, hey, you say Bill Hancock's book inspired you. You know that was a bike ride, right? And I said, well, I do. But a bike ride around campus is a whole different thing because of the speed, the complexity, all that. And that to me is more than I think we can handle. And I maybe someday we will. I'm a cyclist. That is the one thing I do. I ride, 50, 100 miles, some days, and I really am an avid cyclist. So for me, that would be a lot of fun to kind of be in or be part of. But when you think about the run and kind of how cool it is to have people gather for one particular moment when the race starts, it's very different if you have a series of different types of events that are spread out, possibly over a period of days. The Redbud event in Oklahoma City has been enormously popular and very successful, but they have a cycling event one day, running event the other. It's kind of a weekend of it. With OSU's campus and some of the spring events going on, that's not terribly realistic. But we do look at some changes from year to year. Haven't been any wholesale changes, and I think we've been better for it.
Well, it's the ability to have different ages and different abilities all in one spot.
It is, and it's whatever's going on. It's just kind of nice to have that one moment. I think when they ring the bell on January 27th, there's that moment. And those of us who are aware of it, we think about that. There are people that gather in the eastern part of Colorado, in Strasburg, where the plane crash actually took place. I've been out there. There's a beautiful memorial out there that was put together, and it's easy to get to, and you can find information about it on our website. But that's kind of a cool place to be. At times there are a lot of different places and times where something is done to remember these 10 men. But we like to think the run is one of those times that people remember them, and it's more of a joyful, festive environment where the families and those who were touched by their lives directly interact with those who want to remember them and respect their lives. And it makes it really special. And then the day we give away the check during that game, it just kind of brings it all together. Hey, we had a huge crowd come out. We're giving away $20,000 to OSU counseling. And the reason we picked that number is it makes a lot of sense to us. But we also want to be able to endow the race in perpetuity so that we're going, we wanted to endow the scholarships we're giving in perpetuity. And we took advantage of the Pickens match, and that looks like it's a reality. Now, the level of that may change, but $1,000 scholarships now. Hopefully there'll be $10,000 scholarships someday. But we want to build that. We also want to build a little bit of a war chest that we can use if we ever had a really difficult year. So we're sure the run will continue even if something strange happens, like COVID or whatever else. Mm-hmm. And that helps. But we've always been able to make that gift to OSU counseling. And we did even this year with a very small crowd. And it came out of the support, the love, respect, and all that the OSU family and the Stillwater community have had. And by the way, I'd be totally remiss if I didn't compliment the city of Stillwater. I had no idea how involved they would need to be until this started. That was another area that was beyond my learning, beyond my experience. And OSU, I learned very quickly that there are people that live in Stillwater and that are just as passionate about what goes on campus, even if they didn't go to school there. And they're just as passionate about Stillwater as a community as anybody else. And that those people that may not have a direct relationship as a student or faculty at Oklahoma State, those people felt just as close and just as touched by the lives of the 10 men that died in the men's basketball plane crash, also the women's basketball plane crash, and then the homecoming tragedy that came just a few years ago. It is without a great city and a group of people that understand the value of the university and the willingness to work together without conflict and constant competition. You don't have something like the Run be successful for sure, nor do you have a campus like Oklahoma State that's such a nice place to be. The city of Stillwater makes that so possible for us.
And you'd have to work with the police department and traffic and all of those different elements you don't think about.
We do. And I mean, you're closing roads down and you're trying to figure out what the rules are for emergency vehicles if something happens and training your volunteers. We have OSU police come out and talk to our volunteers, but the city of Stillwater does as well. And a ton of people that are from the OSU community are involved in the Run, of course, and that's the majority. There are a lot of people that are just Stillwater residents that care deeply about this cause and about what the Run says about who they are as a community that come out to do it. And that countless people that are in law enforcement, all walks of life within the city of Stillwater are out there helping too. And really, you need a good mix. You need a good mix of young people that come out and that you're hoping there is an attorney party the night before and suddenly they come rolling out at 9:20. You need that, because I know what it was like when I was in school. You need a bunch of serious people that are more mature, that are able to be counted on, to make sure things happen. Because there's no way just a handful of us can figure out all that's going on and make it go right. We have to have a lot of people that have that kind of seniority and that thought process. And we have some students that are every bit as responsible as I am now. I mean, there are certainly mature, responsible students out there, but they tend to fluctuate with their volunteering a little bit more than the older community does, just because their plans can change. It's a drop of a hat, and most of us have pretty, lives that are pretty predictable, and they don't.
It's amazing when you stop and think about all of this started with you reading a book.
Well, I was reading it. My wife could tell I was pretty emotionally moved by it. Even to this day, it did strike me as to how Bill dealt with his son's death, and maybe how I dealt with my father's death when I was in college. And that I really, I'd never really totally grieved the right way, because I couldn't slow down. And that one college class, the business calculus class, scared me to death. I didn't want to, lose all that. And it would be disrespectful to his memory if I did that. But I didn't know how else to deal with it. And I remember laying next to her and we're going to sleep and talking about, I said, I got this idea, it just sounds right. A run for the 10, a 10K run for the 10. It just sounds right. And she's like, how many of these kind of events have you ever been in? Well, I was in one back in 1989. Okay. How many of you volunteered for? Never volunteered for any event like this at all. She goes, and you're going to put the, and she kind of laughed, and she was a competitive cyclist and she was in running events too. And she's like, there's no way. I mean, it sounds too difficult. You have no idea what you're getting into. And so I think, luckily these volunteers that joined and made it more possible for it to be successful and took a lot of that load off, because it did, in hindsight, it did seem like pretty, laughable that it would come off and work at all. And the fact that it's worked as well as it is, I just have to say there's a spirit of 10 people up there that are motivating people, and that their memory, even for people that they didn't know who they were or until they even existed until they came to the run, they can see the impact, and they can have a sense of community going, wow, if the world works this way, where if we lose somebody we love, someone who leaves a huge hole in our lives, that you can see the moms and dads and the brothers and sisters and even the sons and daughters of some of these people, that some of these 10 men that died. If they can find a way forward, then, I can deal with whatever comes in my life. I know that it's possible. And, without that kind of motivation that we have and draw from the lives these 10 men lived, I mean, it wouldn't be possible, no matter how good or bad any of us are as organizers.
Well, it's been amazing. I know our time's about up, so we probably need to wrap it up. Is there anything that I've not known to ask that you want to add? We've covered a lot.
I don't think so. I think it's one thing that I hope that the people that are involved in the run to help put it on, the co-chairs and the volunteers, I hope they understand what an impact they've made on so many lives, and that the 10 men that we lost and the families that they left behind, I hope they have a feeling after years and years go by that the run's given an opportunity for the larger community to share in their grief, and for everyone to support the families, and for the families also to teach us a little bit about how to deal with grief. And if all those things turn out to be true, and if this run's still around years from now, and the memories of these 10 men are kept alive years from now, I think this will have been a real success and something that all of us associated with it are proud of.
It's more of a living memorial.
It is.
In that way. So
changing lives through the resources and scholarships and the training and all the things that go on, and at the same time educating people about those 10 men that we lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. It's been great.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
And I'm like you. I'm hoping more people will join you, and you'll end up with 5,000 at some point.
Look forward to that.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.